And we'll open the regular session, call it to order, have an inspirational reading, and it is my turn. So, I always look for something really dynamic to say, and I'm not sure how dynamic this is, but it's an appropriate time for me to kind of pick on this particular subject. It's a poem, and the poem is "A Leader Is You." A leader is you. A leader is kind. A leader is someone who leads from behind. A leader is you. A leader is wise. A leader is someone we do not despise. A leader is you. A leader is great. A leader is someone we appreciate. A leader is you. A leader is fun. A leader is someone we do not shun. A leader is you. A leader is nice. A leader is someone who gives good advice. A leader is you. A leader is weird. A leader is someone we do not fear. Somehow that applied to me, I thought, but at any rate. A leader is you. A leader is me. A leader is someone who we can believe. A leader is you. A leader is me. A leader is someone anyone can be. So I thought that was appropriate for the times, and I'm hoping that the words of kind and appreciation are going to come at play a little bit stronger. The current climate to me is a little bit shaky, and I don't like it that way. So I'm asking kindness from everyone, to everyone, for everyone. All right. Will you please stand and join me in the pledges? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. All right, we have several presentations in the form of proclamations. And so I got a little bit of the gravelly going on here. I'm going to spread the wealth and let others help me with reading some of these. The first one is Municipal Clerks Week. And we certainly appreciate our municipal clerk. So, whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world. And the office of the professional municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants. And whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels. And whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas the professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. And whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the professional municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the office of the professional municipal clerk. Now therefore I, Deborah Davison, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Manvel, do hereby proclaim April 30th through May 6th as Municipal Clerks Weeks. And I just want to add that this position, Miss Tammy, is she's the first face you see, and she takes care of us and puts forth the best. I'm losing words, but she puts forth the best picture of what Manvel truly is. And sometimes she puts forth a better picture than, some of us might be feeling like some days. So I want to thank you. It's a wonderful profession, but you and your personality give it all the assets that you have, and we appreciate that. So there you go. All right. Next we have, we are not going to, Police Week has been put off. We have some people to honor that are not available for that. And then we have National Public Works Week. I'm going to hand this down. Would you pass that to Jason and let him read for me? Thank you.
Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Manvel, Texas, and whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in Manvel, Texas to gain knowledge of and maintain ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2023 marks the 63rd annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association, now therefore she, Deborah Davison, Mayor of the City of Manvel, Texas, does hereby designate the week May 21 through 27, 2023 as National Public Works Week.
Thank you. And we have one more. We have a busy week. We're proclaiming and celebrating, and this is Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month, and that is for May 2023. And here we have the Warriors for Bikers in the back, and thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And we'll be happy to give you this and award you this as soon as I read it. So thank you again. Whereas motorcycle riding is a popular form of recreation and transportation for thousands of people across the city, state, and nation. And whereas motorcycles are a common and economical means of transportation that reduces fuel consumption and road wear and contributes in a significant way to the relief of traffic and parking congestion. And whereas the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Motorcycle Safety Foundation have designated May as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. And whereas during Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month, motorcycle organizations across the country will be conducting activities to promote the importance of motorist awareness and safely sharing the road with motorcycles, and to remind riders to make themselves more visible to others. Whereas the City of Manvel wishes to promote the safety campaign of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in its effort to ensure the safety and well-being of all. Now therefore I, Deborah Davison, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of the City of Manvel, do hereby proclaim May 2023 as Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. And I'd like to present this to you. Okay, so, let's just kind of do around and maybe 2 rows. How about that? Okay. I got my tall shoes on. Who am I giving this to? To you? Okay, this is the proclamation. And I want to give it to you and let you know that we really do appreciate you and being in this community.
1, 2, 3. One more for me. Now one more. 1, 2, 3. Thank y'all.
Kind of a nifty vest. See if I can't get one of those, huh? Okay. And now we have public comments, and I have a few here. Monica Britton. No Monica Britton.
She had emailed hers in.
She went,
She emailed hers last week, specific for today, so she must have changed her mind.
okay, so I don't have an email. All right. All right, and Stephanie Gregory. Hi again.
My name is Stephanie Gregory, and I am talking about the property at Diamond Storage, the new one, 7227 Cemetery Road. I know that we're on the consent agenda for a little bit later this evening. I just wanted to come up and say, we're getting ready to open, hopefully.
Woohoo.
Yes, thankfully. On Thursday, BBG was there to do the zoning survey, and everything was approved by Ian except for our photometric survey. He said that he thought maybe he could get a variance on that. That was declined. And so our photometric survey is supposed to be completed tomorrow. And as we know, that's probably going to take some time to get back. So I just wanted to come up here and express that we truly need to open. We've had some issues with not getting communicated information timely, although we've been able to jump through the hoops and get everything done to get to this point. So I just wanted to come before you all. I appreciate everybody's help up to this point. We're just truly hoping that we are granted our certificate of occupancy without any further delays going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
you.
Stephanie. All right, Clint Weekly. Hi there. Yeah, I'm timing you.
All right, good evening. Clint Weekly, 7203 McCoy Road, here on behalf of the majority of our locally owned restaurant owners and the majority of our currently licensed food trucks. Manvel has 23 restaurants using the definition adopted in this ordinance. Half are locally owned and operated by families like us, and I want you to know that collectively 10 of our locally owned restaurants are opposed to reducing the distance from 300 yards to 100 yards, but guess what? So are 7 of our most active food trucks. They agree 300 yards is a good balance, and it should be left at that. Additionally, as this amendment was drafted by staff in order to remedy typos, I wanted to bring up some other items that have yet to be addressed, even in this current version. With only 3 minutes then, I'll remain available to repeat them at a slower pace than a regular agenda if you'd like. In the definition of commissary, the second sentence starts with, serves may include. I believe the intent was services may include, and if so, that still needs to be corrected. 35-312, number 2, the sentence reads, is such a matter. I believe the intent was in such a manner. 316, number 2, the sentence reads, retention basin in used. I believe the intent was in use. 318, number 4, the sentence ends with of the as adopted by City of Manvel. I believe the intent was as adopted by. There's still a few other minor issues like that, but those are the most glaring. But even more substantive issues also remain. Number 1, Texas law only permits 4 criminal culpabilities. That's intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, and with criminal negligence. Willfully is not one of them. Most of our ordinances track state law. but this one for some reason did not. Case law is clear that, quote, neither the legislature nor city government has the authority to expand the states of mental culpability found in 6.02 of the Texas Penal Code. See Ogle versus State and Honeycutt versus State. Number 2, in this ordinance, food trucks are prohibited from operating on grass, since it's still listed under the basic requirements for all events, meaning that even backyard weddings, the private events, can't be on grass. Not sure if that was the intent, but every one of our trucks are against that. Number 3, the Texas food rules have exceptions to the six-inch rule, such as pressurized containers. Food truck owners have asked, did the city intend to be more restrictive than state law or just forgot to include the exemptions? Number 4, the same conversation came up regarding the use of gloves. The exception of the glove requirement is proper use of a hand-washing sink. Food truck owners have asked if the city intended to be more restrictive than the food rules or just forgot to include the exception. And lastly, the city has still not yet clarified whether a high school sports game is a special event. The new special event page says, quote, the provisions of this section shall apply regardless of whether the applicant or event is a profit or nonprofit. While it doesn't make sense to ask the school district to file a permit for every game they host, nor do we want that, food trucks are only allowed at 4 types of events according to this ordinance. Which of those 4 does a game at the stadium fall under, and who should apply for the permit? Food truck owners have asked for this to be clarified on the record. Thank you.
Whew. Good job. All right. Next, we have the city manager's update.
Mayor and council members, I have about 3 items for you this evening. Just wanted to let you know, and you are aware and the citizens are aware, the chamber is putting on a business expo and taste of the town. It's on Thursday at the Casey Hall over on Highway 6 towards Alvin. It's from 4 to 7 p.m. and everybody's invited to that. Saturday, obviously, is Election Day. Tomorrow's the last day of early voting. Everybody needs to go and, if you're registered, go and vote. And then the third item is, I just want to let you know that the new McDonald's has broken ground over at Manvel Town Center, so over on Highway 6, kind of in front of where the HEB building is. It's at one of the entrances off of Highway 6. If you look very closely, there's kind of a white sign that says McDonald's out in front of it. I don't have a time frame on when it's going to be done yet, but they are working feverishly on getting that done as quickly as possible, I would bet. So those are my items for you this evening.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. All right, next, we have an update by Tim Austin on state legislation, House Bill 5403, the Manvel Sports Facility District. And good evening.
Good evening.
Did you have fun coming down 288?
Always. I love it. And I apologize for getting here like right on time. I keep forgetting that you've.
Oh, yeah, we bumped it up,
I
yeah.
know, and I should be so grateful to remember that. So what I will do is give you a brief update of the status of the legislation, where it stands in the legislative process, and some quick summaries of some of the provisions of the legislation. But if, and please just interrupt me if anyone has any questions. But if you remember, in January, the City Council authorized the publication of a notice of intent to introduce legislation for the proposed creation of the Manvel Sports Facilities District. And there was a notice then published 30 days after, right after that, 30 days prior to getting the process started for introducing the bill, because that's a prerequisite for getting it introduced. And after that, there's a process that takes some time to get a bill drafted by the Legislative Council, which is the legal group that represents the state legislature, and then not too long ago, a few weeks ago, then the bill was introduced into the House as HB 5403. And so now it's going through the hearing process, and with any luck, it'll pass in the House, and then it will go to the Texas Senate and go through the same process. And typically, bills that are successful pass in the last couple of weeks of the legislative process, because that's when everything ends up getting done in the session. And as you probably well know, when things get crowded up at the very end of the session, a little hiccup can cause unintended consequences. If there's a fight over some policy issue that has nothing to do with this legislation, it could end up being a problem. But we're trying to get things out of the way early on so that we can not have that problem. Yes, ma'am.
Tim, for the people in the audience and the people tuned in, can you just give a layman's explanation or definition of exactly what the management district, why would we do this?
Sure. So now that it's filed, I will get into the substance of it, which is that this bill would create a municipal management district under Chapter 375 of the Texas Local Government Code. And it would also create a special chapter just for this district. That would be Chapter 4004 of the Texas Local Government Code. That creates a special district over a specific area, and it has a lot of the same powers as a MUD would have. Governance is a little different, and some of the goals are different. But what it allows to happen is that this district is created by the state legislature. There's a board appointed that would administer it, just like like a MUD would have a board or a city council. And its specific goals would be, as its name would imply, the sports facilities district. It would be created over acreage that's owned only by, at this point, only by the city of Manvel, that would then be able to generate revenues from various sources, which I'll talk about in a second, and take those revenues and use it to build infrastructure and improvements for sports facilities that would be on that land. I like to describe it as really a credit tool, because if, for instance, City Council wanted to do this without a district, you would have to issue bonds or some other debt that would be payable by the city as a whole. And when you create a district like this, the credit is limited to just the area of the district. So the revenues of the city as a whole are not committed. They're not put at risk. The city's credit isn't at risk. The city's taxpayers have no obligation to pay for any of these facilities. The land itself does that. So the sources that would be tapped by this district would be, in addition to, they would be generated only from within this land and would have no claim on other revenues of the city. That way, the city's credit rating, which has been built up and is a valuable asset of the city as a whole, wouldn't be affected one way or the other with regard to the feasibility of this district. So the revenues that it would have would be property taxes that it would levy only within its boundaries. And remember, this is only land owned by the city at this point. There are no residents on it, not planned to be, and as far as I know. There will be, if this is successful, there will be improvements, hotels, restaurants, sports facilities, things like that would be taxable, that would then generate property tax revenues from the district that it would levy, this board would levy itself. It would also have access to rentals and other payments that the occupants of the property would be paying. For instance, if a hotel or a restaurant were located there, then they would either buy that property from the city or they would lease it on a long-term basis. And then those lease payments would be dedicated towards those improvements. Same thing with fees. People coming in to use the facilities might pay a fee or a parking fee or a use fee for a field or something else, and those fees could be dedicated. So I'm sure there will be sales taxes and hotel occupancy taxes and other things that would be generated specifically within there that the district might be able to work out an arrangement with the entities that collect those taxes to pile those back into it. So I think of it as an economic development tool and a credit tool. It also will be able to move very quickly in terms of negotiating and executing agreements for the people and entities that end up using these things, and would also be available to either itself or by contract to administer it all, to hire people to clean things up and to provide security and code enforcement, fire prevention, those kind of things. They could contribute to the cost of that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, why it would be of use. There's a lot of details about governance and what land can be in it and those kind of things. And I'll talk about that really briefly. The board of directors of this district is not, there aren't really going to be any people there to vote for them, so they're not elected. They will be appointed by city council. The initial board of directors of the district is appointed by the state legislature. And so in the proposed legislation, there's a list of the interim initial directors. Those people would simply serve until their successors would be appointed, their terms would end up, and their successors would be appointed by the city council.
And let me interrupt. There's been some notice that was done improperly or whatever, but these people on this board that were appointed are just appointed as interim members, and they can be appointed, there's a long list. They can be appointed by the mayor, by the city manager, it goes on and on. But all of that was done under the correct way.
Absolutely, and this is done every time the legislature creates a special district. It's got to have a board to start off with. That's why we call them the interim director. So the legislature appoints them. They were not appointed by the city council. They were not designated by city council, anything else. This was one of the last things that went into this legislation was the list of 5 names. There are people from within the city, people interested in serving and all that. They're not ineligible for continuing to serve, but their terms expire, and then their successors are appointed through a process that involves the nomination of either reappointment or new appointment for board members. Those names then go to city council, and city council can say yay or nay with regard to those people. There are requirements for successor board members. They have to either live in the district. I don't think they'll do that because probably no one will live there, at least not right away. They either own land or they are employees or agents or designees of landowners. So I think it's a process really that will go. Initially, the city owns all of the land, so the city will basically nominate people to serve, and then city council will either approve or disapprove of those people.
Now, you mentioned, I'm picking on the things that have been, items of interest to what I understood citizens, that it's come to me. I don't read them myself, but it's come to me that these are items of concern. And so you said nobody lives there as of yet. There are no plans for there to be anybody who lives there.
As far as I know, that's right. Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, discuss annexation. Annexation seemed to be a a problem that maybe we were going to have this huge development and we were going to go grab them and
Right.
give, levy a bunch of taxes on them. That's not going to happen.
Right, this is entirely a voluntary voluntary district. Nobody will be, no land will be in it except by consent of the landowners, and no consent will be presumed other than through a written petition that the landowners would have to sign asking to be put in the district.
And it would have to be 100% participation, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
This process is very familiar to me because I do a lot of mud work. But if you're familiar with how MUDs add land to their boundaries, it's exactly that law. In fact, it's just a cross-reference. It says it will add land to the district in the same manner as a municipal utility district. That means if the district cannot initiate an annexation at all. It has to receive a petition. That petition has to be signed by all the owners of property in that land petitioning to be annexed, including any lien holders for that matter. So if somebody wanted to be in the district, but their mortgage company didn't want them to be, they'd have to get the mortgage company to sign that as well. So it's a very elaborate process. And the only other way to add land to a district like this would be by election. You would have to have an election of the, if there were people who lived in the area to be added, then you'd have to have a vote. Almost never happens, but that's another way to do it. And then, of course, the land that's initially in here was simply land owned by the city. Didn't need a petition because it's the initial land, but, you wouldn't have passed that resolution back in January if you didn't want to ask that that the district be created.
So strictly, it's a funding mechanism.
Correct. And
Okay.
it cannot tax and cannot require any revenues from anywhere outside that would be generated from outside its boundaries, and has no claim on any other taxes or revenues other than might be voluntarily or by contract provided to it, for instance, with users or with an economic development process or something like that.
Okay.
The other details of it, just to kind of go along this path of accountability, everything that this district does is accountable to city council. The big things would be the sale of bonds. So any bonds that get sold by this entity, which hopefully it has good revenues and it's able to generate some bonding capacity to jumpstart this development, those bonds have to be specifically approved by city council before they can be issued. It's totally discretionary. Unlike with MUDs, where, well, the MUD may not need your permission to sell bonds as long as they meet the requirements of the consent conditions. This is just like every time a bond is sold, it comes to city council has to approve it. Any delegation of authority by interlocal agreement to this board of directors or this district, it would have to be approved by city council as well. I am jumping around on all of this, but are there any other questions?
Well, I probably facilitated your jumping, but.
I know, I lost my.
I'm
I had
sorry.
a real sweet little outline.
I know
Got
you
me off of
did.
it.
I know you did.
So the district is also, if the city council ever wants to dissolve it, it's a unilateral act by city council. Now, if there are any debts outstanding, we have to provide for payment of the debt. So you don't want to have it sell a bunch of bonds and then dissolve it. But you could, if you wanted to. You just have to provide, you'd either have to pay off the bonds or wait till they were already retired. The requirements for serving on the board, other than the property owner status or agent or designee, it has to be an eligible voter of the state of Texas and over 18, basically a citizen of the state, and not a convicted felon or an adjudicated lunatic.
Oops.
Adjudicated. You can be a lunatic, you just can't, you have to be sneaky about it.
You said the state of Texas, so they don't have to be a resident of the city.
They do not.
Okay.
probably you would want them to be, but they don't have to be. But they do have to be a resident of the state. Not a resident of the state by virtue of being in prison.
Right.
Okay.
Can't be in jail.
Once this, assuming that the legislature does pass this, and it gets signed by the governor, then what we would expect to do would be to take the initial board, swear them in, and get started with planning and getting agreements in place and things like that. But until that happens, this district doesn't create any obligations, any financial obligations, any burdens on the city. If it ends up not doing anything at all, then it's just a piece of paper. So there's no downside to this as long as you don't create one by contract or issuance of debt. And usually what will happen is that that'll be self-regulating. There won't be any debt issued unless it's got good credit. It won't have good credit unless there's some form of legal revenue that comes to it, either through taxes or contracts or whatever.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks, Tim. I was not here on the 17th when we passed the resolution. I was fortunately recovering from 2 days of being in the hospital with pneumonia, so I couldn't make that meeting. I thought that I recalled a couple of things that I don't know that I saw. I thought at one point, I don't know if this is a you question or a Kyle question, that when we were talking about this district, that we were going to be including language that we were going to ask the state to kick in some of their sales tax revenue. But I didn't see that in the bill, so
That is
I was
not-
surprised.
You are absolutely correct about
Okay.
your assumption. That was my assumption as well. And by the time it made it through legislative council and input from committee chairs and people like that, we were advised not to put that in the bill.
Okay.
So you're not crazy. That was exactly what we thought.
So I think for me, then the lesson learned here is while I understand the resolution was what it was and it was appropriate, my disappointment is having first time read it was when it was introduced. I think I would have preferred that we saw the perfected language before it went out, and I don't recall seeing it. If it was, then I owe you an apology, but I didn't see it.
No, we had time restrictions
Yes.
that
Okay.
were,
So I just,
I think-
that's all I want.
go ahead, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think you were talking about the legislative council as the one that actually drafted that language.
That's right. This 5403 is basically a form that over the years, the political minds in the legislature have said, we want management district bills that we create to look substantially like this. And whenever there is a variation or something like that, you better have a darn good reason and come and talk to us about it. And we did do that on this issue that you're specifically talking about, and we just didn't get any support for putting that in the bill. So when legislative council sat down to draft it, they basically gave us the format for the standard management district bill.
Okay.
If there is a change in attitude, or, we can make a better argument, maybe in 2 years or 4 years, we could go back and ask for it to be added.
And then the last question or clarification I have is to make sure that I understand properly that our intent also is that this doesn't just cover the L ball fields, it's the entire tract. So we would be leaning on this district to do the bonds, to build the city hall and the things potentially.
It would cover the entire 160 acres, but actually what will probably be is the contract revenue that comes from the retail and the other things, that would be included in the district as part of the contract revenue.
But
It doesn't have to be the one that actually issues debt for the city buildings.
But potentially could. They could, the district could
That's a
potentially
question for
build.
Tim. I don't know
Could the
that.
district build the city facility since it's inside the district?
It could. I mean, we'd have to come up with some agreements that divided authority and help show where the revenues were coming from and all that. But yes, especially if it's within the boundaries of the district, it's perfectly eligible for doing public buildings as well as sports facilities. I think we're going to find out.
I think there's lots of ways to come up with the revenue source, but what a great way to build public facilities without having the city having to take on the responsibility for the debt. And now everybody who doesn't live in the district gets their building built.
And the premise was, it's best to establish this and then be able to make adjustments further down the road.
I think you've answered my questions that I had after first seeing it, so thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
So, along with what Jason was saying, I agree with Kyle. I would prefer, well, we'll just wait and see what the future holds, is that using the revenues to build is a lot better than going into any more debt if we don't have to. So I'm glad to know that there's two options there, using that revenue and instead of going into any more debt. And another thing I wanted to ask is that when somebody gets their tax bill and they have all those little lines of the different taxing entities, will this particular item be a line item on anybody's tax bill for anything, just to show that it's there?
It will not,
Okay.
unless the unlikely event that that taxpayer lived actually in the boundaries of that district.
Okay.
So, no, there will probably be some who are like business owners who have chosen to locate in there and know about it, like a restaurant or a hotel. I mean, they'll get a tax bill. But if you're talking about the typical homestead in the city, no.
Nobody gets anything.
There's no liability for those taxpayers with regard to this district.
So when we're telling people, let's just say, we always have information on the website about taxing entities, and let's say excuse me, it just came out, and we put a lot of information online, our plans, our budgets, our audits, all of those things, and people kind of like to compare in and out about where money comes in and what we're doing with it. Is there going to be some documents online or someplace in the system that tells everybody, this is how much we're debt, by the way, this is the interest, and pretty soon we're going to be making payments, and so people get to kind of see that these things will be getting paid for themselves within that system? Is it something that will be a line item in our budget, or will it be, how's that going to work?
That would be up to you guys in your budgeting process, how that works. I would just, off the cuff, say yes, absolutely. The board of directors, as I've said, is appointed by city council. What that means for, I'll try not to step too far out of my lane here, but for auditing purposes, it's a sub-unit of the city.
Gotcha, okay.
Not for credit purposes or debt, things like that, but in terms of what's audited. So it'll be part of your own audit. It may be an addendum or something, but and it's subject to the same rules with regard to audits and budgets, open meetings, open records, basically everything that you guys have to abide by, it will too. Nothing will be done in secret because it can't be. If it's done in secret, it's not effective. So it'll all be out there.
Okay.
See and comment.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Austin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate the clarity, and
Are you all meeting at 6 from now on, or is this just because you wanted me to be late?
yeah, I want you at 6 from now on. Here, we have, oh, okay, you've got to talk to him. She's going to meet you out there. Okay, thank you. Bye. All right, number 2. On the regular agenda, we have consideration and possible action to approve second and final reading of ordinance 2023-0-16, an ordinance amending Chapter 35 Licenses and Special Business Regulations of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Manvel, Texas, by amending Article 10, Mobile Food Vendors, to change the minimum distance requirement between a mobile food unit, temporary food establishment from 300 to 100 yards, and add 2 requirements to food truck operations, repealing provisions in conflict therewith, providing a penalty in an amount not to exceed $2,000 per day for each day of violation or any provision hereof, and providing for severability. This was tabled at the April 3rd, 2023 meeting and at the April 17th, 2023 council meetings. Jessica.
So from the last meeting where this was tabled, it was asked for staff to go back and provide clarification regarding the temporary food establishments. We went in there, we clearly just sort of left the definition as a definition and made a clarification under that permit about how consecutive days work. And we took it around to other city staff who have nothing to do with permits and health and said, hey, how do you read this? And they read it in the manner that it's intended to be. So we figured any layperson could read it and we'd be okay. So that's what we had. And then I know Councilman Albert wasn't at the previous meeting, but we also, the request that was made for definition of restaurant, central preparation facility, and commissary were added in there at the request. And then we also defined that distance measurement from the 100 yards of a restaurant to a mobile food unit, so.
All right. Is there any discussion? What do we have?
I mean, do we have any answers to Clint's concerns? They were numerous and fast, so maybe.
It went so fast that I couldn't write it down. I would have to go back and rewatch the video from the meeting. The typo, commissary, I fully agree. I admit I don't cut and paste, I type, and sometimes my fingers don't hit the right keys. So some things on the typos like that, I could, fix, but without actually telling you specifically what each of those typos are for your amendment, I'm not entirely sure how you're able to pass that without tabling it again and coming back so I can fix the typos.
Well, it would be my guess that Mr. Weekly would be happy to give you those corrections that need to be made. The only substantive matter that I heard, and I may be incorrect on this, was the 300, 100 yards.
Yes, thank you. I know you have to invite me, and I would love to slow down, so sorry for having to do that. But, yes, so aside from the typos, and Ms. Jessica, I'll be happy just to give you my notes here. There are others, they're not really that big of a deal, more grammar, but from the perspective of the food truck owners, and this has been a concern because we have restaurant owners who also own food trucks in the city. They see both sides of this ordinance, and we have nobody who has come out and said, we want to reduce the distance. Our food truck, I talked to 8 of them today to confirm before I spoke on their behalf. And 7 of those 8 says, we don't need to come that close to a restaurant. We'd have less sales. We didn't ask for that. 900 feet is perfectly fine for us. We don't want to upset the brick and mortar businesses. And then, of course, of our locally owned and managed restaurants, Sonic's now owned by a bigger group. It's no longer Paul anymore. I call him. He says, hey, I sold it. They're a big group, a conglomerate. You haven't returned my phone call, and some others. But all your mom and pop, your local stores, the majority of us are against that. They think 300 yards is perfectly sufficient. It's a good balance between the ability for food trucks to go where the money is. And if they want to get close to a restaurant, your ordinance as it stands allows for the restaurant to give them permission. So if there is let's say a hamburger truck that wants to come at the bus drive across from our shaped I stand, and they say, hey, are you good with a hamburger truck right here? So absolutely. We give them their written permission, and they're covered by the ordinance. What we don't want is these food trucks coming on the weekends, parking across the street from our huge tax base seafood restaurants when Manvel Seafood opens back up. We don't want them encroaching on that. But the thing is no food truck owners have asked for that. And so speaking on behalf of both sides of that, I think it's a good thing just to leave it as it is. Your city attorney could probably speak on behalf of the culpabilities. I don't know if that was just a copy and paste for another state. That's a real easy fix. And then the grass thing. You want to address that before I move forward? Or sorry?
Yeah, that is an older term we see that in probably of the 1,000 ordinances we have, that it's common in there. So what we did, we actually put in a general penal provision in section 1 of the city code, which just lists the 4 current culpable mental states, but that can be fixed. That's not a problem.
And then this high school event thing is a big question. The food owners want to know, because a lot of them say, I have a health permit, why can't I go to the high school? I don't know that the school district is going to file a type C recurring event for every Friday football game, nor for the karate tournament they had last weekend, or for all the other sports events that we have. So the school district is kind of like, we didn't get a permit. Food trucks are like, I have a health permit, I can go. So, but since the food truck's only allowed in 4 types of events, city approved, city sponsored, private events, and type Cs, which one is it? They want to know, which one is it? Because they don't want to get a ticket.
And not for nothing, when we talked about the events, I brought this almost exclusively up, is a football game an event? And we weren't requiring them to get a permit, so.
So I wasn't aware that there was strife over at Alvin ISD over any of these things. It has not been brought to my attention. So this is new for me. And yes, Councilman Albert, you brought it up before. I do remember that conversation. Regarding the distance requirements, it was already 300 yards. So if we're going to go back and take a step back in time when everything sort of came about with the special events and opening everything up, this was staff's attempt to just open this up with the mobile food units. We don't want our businesses, our brick and mortar businesses to, have competition. This is just kind of where we felt that it would land. If we needed to make some tweaks, I know for myself, it was, hey, let's see how this unfolds in 6 months, and if nobody likes it. This is also the first that I'm hearing from any of the businesses about it, too. Obviously, we wouldn't have made this recommendation to you to go from 300 to 100 yards if we knew that our business community was affected by it. So I don't have issue if, however you decide you choose to adopt it, that go from 300 yards to 100 yards. I feel like there probably will always maybe need to be adjustments until we hit the sweet spot on that, because we want events to come into our community. We want to keep having them, and we want them to be done in the right manner with that perfect balance between food trucks and brick and mortar. So.
And yes, ma'am, like I said, there unfortunately are businesses who did not want their name mentioned, so I said I would not. I would say only the majority of. I could even show you privately their names if you want to see. These are our big businesses and our busy food trucks, and they said we're good with it. They don't want the restaurant owners to think they're encroaching. They've not had an issue with the pass. They think 300 yards is sufficient. In addition to that, the grass thing was a big deal. We had an event this past weekend. Code enforcement came out and wanted to measure the driveway because the food trucks need to be on crushed rock. Our personal opinion is that if it's our private property and we've invited a food truck there, we maintain the grass. If there's ruts, we'll handle it. If it's too wet, we'll move them on the crushed rock. And also True Grid pavers, the permeable pavers like at Redeemer Church, are an approved parking lot in the city, but not an approved surface for food trucks. Those are the plastic reinforced 80,000 plus pound permeable pavers that aren't an approved surface. The food truck owners want to be able to park on grass. If you want that to be only certain events, they understand that. However, none of them were aware of that. And I don't know if anyone has questions on the grass part. I don't want to keep moving.
Clint, I'm curious. I mean, maybe I'm just so completely out of this this conversation and this
We are too.
loop, but have you tried to convey these things to staff before you came before us with grammatical errors and all of that?
So this past weekend was the first time that I was aware that code enforcement would come out and measure your driveway to make sure you're on crushed rock. And then when I went and looked at the grass prohibition to confirm what she was saying was correct, that prohibition is under the basic requirements. So that's any food truck operation. If the intent of staff was to only require food trucks to be on approved surfaces at these bigger events, I think that makes sense. But a private backyard wedding or even a type C that's at a private business, I will tell you that no one that I spoke to in the business community was consulted regarding the ordinance or even why the grass thing kind of came up. Previously, it wasn't there. I guess it was amended not long ago. But as this gained traction and other restaurant owners started reaching out to me and we talked about it, and then this last event where the grass was a big deal, I brought in more crushed rock Saturday morning. Thank you, Dan, for moving quickly on that permit. We were able to just get the truck completely out of the driveway altogether. But I would prefer not to keep putting crushed rock. We have 2.5 acres of grass. That's just my personal opinion. But again, the food truck owners are on the same page with regard to the grass. I just don't know, we don't know what the intent is.
All right, what say you?
So previously, before the ordinance was amended and approved in February, we didn't even allow it on crushed gravel. But we were acknowledging that we do have some businesses that we still have crushed gravel. We still have those surfaces. And if we're not asking them to change it because they're not doing any sort of development, then those should be acceptable places that you could park a food truck. Grass, I think it's obvious with that. It rains. We live in a rainy climate and that sort of situation, causing a mess. So we wanted to keep it on hard surface, including gravel. The distance measurements that Mr. Weekly is speaking of is we were trying to maintain the fire lane on the crushed gravel driveway out there and still be able to have the distance that a food truck could fit. So that's why there was some measurements where it was just important to keep that fire lane open and accessed, so.
I'll talk about the glove thing here in a minute. We don't have a food truck right now in the city, but I do want to relay that issue. After the fire marshal came out, he was very professional, but we discussed if we needed 25 feet on our property, why aren't my culverts 25 feet? And will the city give me wider culverts? And he said, well, I'm not here for that. The design criteria manual was different when you got your certificate of occupancy. So I looked at the design criteria manual, and no part of my business exceeds 150 feet from the public right-of-way, so we were exempt from fire lanes altogether. The whole measurement and ordeal and meeting out there was for naught. On the glove issue, food truck owners, they all cook differently depending on their product. There are some frozen custard trucks and coffee trucks who serve cold beverages. The inspection process requires a hand washing sink in addition to a 3-compartment sink. That's state law. However, the requirement to use single-use gloves, they're kind of on different pages on it depending on what food they're cooking. If you go to Subway, you'll notice they put on gloves, they make your one sandwich, they take the gloves off, they check you out, they put on gloves, and they go from there. Well, depending on what you're serving, that could be cumbersome. You could have a cook who has gone through the proper hand washing techniques, minimum of 20 seconds. He's used his hand washing sink, and he's preparing things on the grill. And then a person who is serving has food, gloves on, and then serves that food. But this ordinance requires all of them to have gloves on. I personally don't have a preference on it, but the food truck owner wanted just to express there's an exception to the glove rule in state law. We're trained on the Texas food rule standard. So our managers on these trucks are doing what the state certificate trained them to do. And if we say in the ordinance that food gloves are always required without mentioning the exception, they just want to know, is the city intending to be more restrictive, or did we just not include the exception for proper hand washing technique? Just a comment. And then lastly, the 6-inch rule, food trucks are limited on space and floor plan. So the 6-inch rule says all food product has to be at least 6 inches off the ground. There are several food trucks who say that's no problem. We do that already. There are some food trucks who have cases of Coca-Cola, Sprites, or canned Cokes, etc., that are allowed to sit directly on a floor because they're pressurized. If there's a hole in there, they spill out. There's no threat of contamination. So under state law, there's exceptions to the 6-inch rule, but the ordinance does not include that exception in the ordinance. So again, they want to know, can I no longer have stuff sit like liquid tight containers is another exception. If you wanted to store a bag of sugar on the floor, it can't be on the floor, but if you put it in a liquid tight container, you're exempt from the 6-inch rule. So some trucks may have to change up what they're doing, or if staff says, yeah, you know what, there are exceptions, we'll include those to mimic state law. They just want to know what side they're on.
Okay. All right. Where are we? This is, obviously, those changes need to be made. What do we want to do here, council? What? I got nothing. Okay.
Do we,
Yeah.
Do we have to table it to get those changes done?
Okay, table number 3. All right.
I would request if you're tabling it, can I get a clarification and a rundown of what you want staff to address? Because I've heard, comments from the public, but I would like to know what you as council would like to see to be addressed in here. Is it the distancing requirements, the grass surface? I cannot speak because I'm not subject matter expert on food. So I can't really speak to some of the things required by TFER and then what we have in here, if they're more stringent or not. So I'd have to go back and ask those questions.
Well, I have a comment. The only two things that I think stand out is the distance requirement. If the distance requirement asked is 300, fine. Grass, I get it. I mean, that's weird to me that there would be grass there, and we should let people, I guess, do that if that's, it didn't occur to me that people do have food trucks on their property. Those are the only two things. But third, any legal language and any interpretation, I struggle with that only because only our attorney should be giving us that language, and it has to be because that's what keeps us out of trouble. But another thing, too, is that interpretation, that's up to the code enforcer. Is that correct? Because I can appreciate what he's saying, that we just want to know which side the city falls on. Because when a code enforcement person comes up and they're looking at it, the goal is for them to keep them open, keep them safe, and move along. So the minute we write it down is the only thing that they're going to read. And some code enforcement person's going to come up and decide that they want to interpret it different. So how does that work?
So currently, we didn't change, I don't think, any of that stuff when we did the revisions for the mobile food units. So that probably has existed in there for a while. I don't know. I'd have to go back because we did an amendment in June with mobile food units. And then I think the original adoption of that, which was back in, 2018, 2019. So I'm not entirely sure. Again, this is kind of the first time I'm hearing there's a question for mobile food units when they're coming for any sort of inspection. But I'm sure that as the city, we'd be more than happy to, if the public has those questions, that we could answer those things if it applies, if it doesn't, or whatever. It's just the first I'm hearing of it. Granted, I'm just on the permitting side of it, but it is the first that I'm hearing of it. No, it should not be at the discretion of a code enforcement officer of who sees what in what light. If a regulation or ordinance says something, that's what you do. I think that was said before one time on council, if it's written in the ordinance and there's a regulation, that we're going to enforce it. And if it doesn't say it, we're not going to. But discretion should not be there. Common sense sometimes, but maybe not, discretion. We're not allowed to give that discretion. You as a council give that discretion.
In Mr. Weekly's notes that he gave you, do you have those items that are listed that it says, I don't even know what I'm referring to. Clint, the things that, yeah, you didn't have to travel. The things that are in the statutes, but it's discretionary.
Well, it's our opinion as trained food managers that it's not discretionary, it's just the exception was left out. It's not a very commonly looked at thing, but it is 228.69 of the Texas Food Rules. It's on the checklist for the inspection manual, and it says unless described by paragraph 2.
And that's in your notes?
No, ma'am, that's not.
Okay.
And I can provide those.
Okay. I think if you had some direct communication with Jessica, and then it would be helpful. I mean, we want to listen to this, and we don't want to be unreasonable, but we didn't know.
Sure.
So I think that this has been a really drawn-out, tedious process for all of us, and we welcome that you've done the legwork on this. But if you could communicate with her directly, make an appointment, and then we, the two of you can maybe, kind of find out what's reasonable and what's not. I mean, you kind of alluded to the fact that some of it you didn't really care, but.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
some of it,
Yeah.
it's grammar, if you don't mind it, you
Exactly.
don't mind
Well,
it, but-
no, it's not that part of it. I'm talking about even some of the rulings. You kind of just said, doesn't matter to me. And so, because we could be doing this for a very long time if we don't get some direct communication. And if it keeps coming through all of us, we could be doing it forever.
I don't know if this is permissible, Mayor, but I'll tell you, there was a restaurant owner here tonight that's particularly concerned with this as well. More could not be here. The ask from the business community is vote this down, start a workshop, invite your business owners and your food truck owners, get everybody in the same room together, and then go from there. Because then you'll hear, why can't we park on?
Didn't we do that? Didn't we have a?
Well, and that's what I was just waiting for a chance to jump in here. If we table this, then doesn't that really just give her 2 weeks to come up with things before it's back on the agenda? I mean, should we kill it and give them an opportunity to go back and fix everything? Because even the things that Clint's talking about, it feels like they're not even in this that's in front of us. They're in the food service rules that aren't even before us right now. That have everything to do with the food truck, but aren't being considered in this ordinance. I mean, is that the right way to go to start over, or to make sure that we get all the stakeholders at the table and put the right thing together versus
And I think.
is 2 weeks enough time?
Yes, for the things that have been said, yes. To get everybody in the room to discuss it, no, 2 weeks is not enough time. I mean, I'll tell you, when we went through this process before, we were trying to correct our typos and kind of went down the great rabbit hole that we're in right now, we welcomed public comment back in February and January. We got nothing back. So to kind of, you're like, hey, I think we're going the right path in here, but we didn't get any public comment. So, I mean, you want to talk about feeling in the dark, and then now somebody's biting your hand because you didn't know that they didn't like those things. But no, we appreciate and we welcome the comment that we can get back from the community. So whatever you guys, decide, you want to kill it and we start all over and we have the conversations.
Let me just
whatever.
make a suggestion. You have an election in a couple of days. There are going to be at least 2 new council members, possibly 4. Let the new council deal with it. Don't worry about it right now. It's not going to make or break anything. Let the new council deal with it.
And I think that's fair, because in 2 weeks,
It's gonna be a new council
potentially
anyway.
and I'd rather
Yeah.
that you put something before them that is perfected than a dumpster fire. I mean, not that this is a dumpster
Yeah.
fire, but you get what I mean.
You starting dumpster fires,
Dumpster fires.
Clint?
So,
Ma'am,
Okay, so some of those changes can just readily be made. And then, so are we tabling again? Is that what we're doing, or
I
are we
would
killing
suggest
it?
you just not take any action on the second reading. Let
Okay.
it go and let the next council deal with it.
Okay, all right.
If the council at that time wants to modify the ordinance, they can do that. If they don't, then you have an ordinance on the table right now. You voted on the first reading, you've tabled possibly the second reading several times. Other things have come up. Let the next council deal with it, since it's going to change at the next council meeting anyway.
I am personally asking you to talk to Jessica about some of the other things, just so you can, only the high points will
I'm not going
be.
to throw anybody under the bus, but I did call the city attorney. I was going to give him a hard time, give him a heads up, but he's a busy man. So if it's not me, anybody else, it doesn't have to be me.
Well, you're the one who's done the legwork, so let it be you, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for
Okay.
your time.
All right. Do I have a motion to take no action? How do we do this?
Just take no action.
Just take no action.
Move on to the next item.
Okay. All right. Number 3, consideration and possible action to authorize the city manager to enter into a temporary assignment agreement for the temporary resale of take-or-pay surface water from the Brazos River Authority and authorize the execution of any amendment to the current agreement with BRA necessary for the temporary resale.
I'll start it and then I'll let Bobby. We were contacted by the Brazos River Authority. Bobby has some good contacts there. The city has a take-or-pay contract for water rights in the Brazos River Authority's system. There are downstream customers that need temporary water, and they've asked the BRA if there are any customers or any supplies of water that don't need their water right now, that for a temporary period of time, maybe a year, the customers would be willing to sell it. So I'll turn it over to Bobby and he can talk about it a little bit more.
Okay, I love talking about this stuff, so. By way of background, in 2019, after a couple of years of master water planning, getting the funding, and having kind of an inside scoop on Brazos River Authority being able to, through this litigation they had, free up some more surface water. Because right now, most of Brazoria County, including the Manvel, exclusively we're on groundwater. We have wells. And that can be, you've heard me probably talk about this before, but that can become a problem if the state comes in and does like they did to Galveston County, Harris County, Fort Bend County, Austin County, and they have what's called a subsidence district, because if there's too many people pumping the wells, the ground sinks. There's other problems too, at some point, there's not enough natural recharging to do the wells, and slowly the water is being taken out faster than it accumulates, and that's also another problem. So surface water is a huge deal, and as you may know, surface water in the state of Texas is pretty well gobbled up, locked up, and you can't find any. And the state has come into these other counties and made them impose a groundwater reduction plan, meaning everybody, you've got to get off your wells a good portion, not 100%, but you have to get off your wells, and then they're scrambling to buy water however they can at some crazy prices. So in 2019, the Brazos River Authority won their lawsuit, and it basically allowed them to prove there's more water in their system than they had on paper, so they're able to sell some more surface water. And we had gotten a couple of years' worth of planning and talking to them and get the funding. We were ready to go when the water came available, and they actually gave us some. We beat out some of the big boys north of us looking for some of this water. So it was a great accomplishment for us to get this, because it's diversified our water supply and also added to our water supply. So hopefully that'll be a good chunk that's going to take us to full build out for Manvel. So we buy water from BRA, we have the right, and we have to pay for it every year. And just the way that the industry works is called a take or pay, which means it's going down the river, you pay for it whether you take it or not. And right now, we don't have the water plant in place, we're not able to take it. But that's the deal. We have to lock it up and pay the fee every year, because that's how this industry works. This year, they're having a drought in other parts of the state. And every year, Brazos River Authority releases stored water from their reservoirs to help industry, farmers, mining operations, and that sort of thing. This year, because of the drought, they were not able to release any of the stored water from the reservoirs to help these other entities. So these other entities, the only hope they have is to find some water from somebody that they can buy. So when we got a call from Kathy at BRA, she said, look, we've got some people looking for water. Would you be interested in assigning temporarily, like through to the end of August, our water and get some money back? Because we're paying this money one way or another, not getting anything for it right now. And if we can recoup some of that money, that would be a pretty good thing for the city. We don't have anybody lined up yet. This is all happening pretty quickly. So right now, what we're asking for is just kind of the authority, because it's going to require, number one, an amendment to our contract with BRA, and that's pretty standard and perfunctory. The second thing is, like Sugarland did this, and they sold some water to Dow. And from what we're hearing, Dow needs even more water. So if we can get the scoop in, sell some of our water just temporarily, because obviously we don't need it by August 31st. We can recoup some of this money back from the city. That's a long way to say, this is a really good deal, we really support this, and we're gonna try to, get some money back from the city that we're paying anyway.
And as I recall, when we did that, we knew that this was always a possibility. We locked it in early so that we had it when we need it, but we knew that we wouldn't need it right away, so we could monetize it potentially later, and later's today.
This is a great, great opportunity for us, so.
Yeah, just as point of reference, in our master water plan, it looks like, and it's all dependent upon growth and the needs. In 2026, 27, and 28, the anticipation is a well each year. And then, but in 2029, with anticipated growth, we're going to start needing surface water as part of the water, I don't know what you call it, the water package that the city has. We're going to need surface water probably by that time. But as of right now, and for the next couple of years, we're not going to need it. And this may be a way of actually recouping some of that cost.
All right. Can I have a motion to give authority to the staff to sell?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. I love it when I don't have to complete the sentence. We just, we just get to flip 6-0, 6-0, excuse me. All right, yeah. All right, consideration and possible action to approve the appointments as recommended by Mayor Davison to the TERS 3 board positions number 3 and 5 with a term to expire May 2024 and positions 2 and 4 with a term to expire May 2025.
Can I go grab?
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
okay, so we have under the TERS, yeah, gotcha, okay. We have Nicole Mitchell, Kim Bickham. We have a vacant position, but that will be filled with the new finance person whenever we hire that
Right.
person. Okay, and then Devin Jones. So this is a reappointment of 4 of the, well, 3 of the positions at this point. So, do I have any objections, or do I have a motion to approve those 3 appointments?
I make a motion to approve those appointments.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor? All right, motion carries 6-0. Then on the let's see, consideration and possible action to approve the appointments as recommended by Mayor Davison to the SMDA board positions number 1, number 3, and number 5, with a term to expire May 2024, and positions 2 and number 4 with a term to expire May 2025. So in 2024, it would be myself, Kim Bickham, and Devin Jones. And in 2025, it would be Nicole Mitchell and our future finance director. So do I have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Mayor and council comments. Anybody got anything? Vote, 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 vote. Okay, that's it. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? Motion carries